Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Center for Spiritual Deepening, the third and final installment of Anthony De Mello, Happiness Now, Endless Enlightenment. It's been quite an interesting discussion so far, and eager to see how LJ is going to wrap it up. Like to remind you that in 2 weeks, we will have Jim Hollis in his third appearance at the center, discussing the psychodynamics of relationships. So Jim is always very insightful. So we're looking forward to that one as well. And so without further ado, LJ, I'll hand it over to you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming back.
Hey.
I may not be able to show you a video tonight. I can't quite find the clip. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually have you listen to a little bit of a longer clip from Awareness, which was the last retreat that Tony De Mello gave in America before he died in the late 80s. So I'm going to cue this up for you. It's about 10 minutes, but that's the only clip we'll have tonight, and then we'll just have some time for talking.
You have a formula that isn't the truth. Daydreams, but never lose consciousness of your surroundings. You're always alert. You know, it's like a mother who would be sleeping. She doesn't hear the planes roaring above the house, but she hears the slightest whimper of the baby. She's alert. She's awake. When a person's awake, the person's awake. Let's get there. Then we'll know. One may not say anything about the awakened state. One can only talk about the sleeping state. One hints at the awakened state. One may not say anything about happiness. Happiness cannot be defined. What can be defined is misery, unhappiness. Drop that and you will know. Love cannot be defined. Unlove can. Drop unlove, drop fear, and you will know.
Chapter 30, Arriving at Silence.
Everybody's asking questions on what will happen when they arrive. Very few are really. There's this curiosity, that's the word. Curiosity. It doesn't matter. What's important is that you would have grasped what I'm saying. But we're always asking, how would this fit into that system? Or would this make sense in that context? Or what will it feel like when we get there? Get started. You'll know. It cannot be described. We cannot say. And so it is said so widely in the East. Those who know do not say. Those who say do not know. It cannot be said. Only the opposite can be said. The guru cannot give you truth, as I shall explain to you sooner or later. Truth cannot be put into words. You have a formula. That isn't the truth. That isn't the reality. Reality cannot be put into a formula. The guru can only point out your errors. When you drop your errors, you will know truth. And then you cannot say. This is common teaching among the great Catholic mystics, the great Thomas Aquinas, who towards the end of his life, I thought he kept that famous silence of his for just a couple of months or something. It went on for years. He wouldn't write, he wouldn't talk. He had seen. And he realized that he had made a fool of himself, and he said so explicitly. It's like if you've never tasted a green mango, which are found in abundance in my country, and you said to me, what does it taste like? And I'd say to you, oh. And in giving you a word, I put you off the track. Try to understand that. Unless you're very wise, which most people are not, they seize upon the word. They seize upon the words of Scripture, and they've got it all wrong. Sour, and you say vinegar sour. Oh, no, not vinegar sour. You say lemon sour. You say, no, not lemon sour. What sour? Mango sour. But I've never tasted one. Too bad. Then you go ahead and write a doctoral thesis on it. You wouldn't have if you had tasted it. You really wouldn't. You'd have written a doctoral thesis on other things, but not on this. And the day you taste a green mango, you say, God, I made a fool of myself. I shouldn't have written that thesis. Exactly what Thomas Aquinas did. He read a whole book written by a great German philosopher and theologian precisely on the silence of St. Thomas. He just went silent, that's all. He wouldn't talk. The great foundation of his Summa Theologica, which was the summary of all his theology, in the prologue he says, about God, we cannot say what he is, but rather what he is not. And so we cannot speak about how he is, but rather how he is not. And then he talks in his famous commentary of Boetius, De Trinitate, on the Trinity. And he says there are three ways of knowing God. One, in his creation. Two, in his action through creation. And the highest form of the knowledge of God, to know that one does not know. The highest form, talking about the Trinity, to know that one does not know. Now, this is not an Oriental Zen master. This is a canonized saint of the Roman Catholic Church, the prince of theologians for centuries, who's talking. To know him as unknown, and in another place he says, as unknowable. Reality, God, divinity, love is unknowable, meaning cannot be comprehended by the thinking mind. I'll explain that to you. I'll show you why it is so. And that will set at rest so many questions that people would have, because we're always living under the illusion that we know. We don't. We cannot know. What then is Scripture? A hint, a clue, not a description, silly. The fanaticism of sincere believers causes more evil than the united effort of 200 rogues. It really does. It's terrifying to see what sincere believers will do because they think they know. You don't. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we had a world where everybody said we don't know? Wouldn't that be marvelous? We don't know. A man born blind who comes to me and says, what is this thing called reality? Or rather, what's the color green like? And how does one describe the color green to someone who is born blind? One uses analogies. One says, you know, the color green, it's something like soft music. He says, oh, something like soft music? Yeah, soothing, soft. Oh, okay. Another guy comes to me and says, what's the color green like? I say, you know, it's something like soft satin. He says, oh, I see. The next day I know they're bashing each other over the head with bottles. One saying it's soft music. The other one says it's satin. And so it goes on. And neither of them knows a thing of what they're talking about. It's as bad as that. And it's even worse. Because one day, you restore sight to this man. And he's sitting there in the garden, and he's looking all around him. And I say to him, Well, now you know what the color green is. He says, that's right, I heard some of it this morning. You know you're surrounded by God and you don't see him. The final barrier to the vision of God, is your God concept. You miss it because you think you know. That's the terrible thing about religion. That's what the Gospels are saying. They knew, so they got rid of him. The highest knowledge of God is to know God as unknowable. There's far too much God talk. The world is sick of it. There's too little awareness, too little love, too little happiness. Or let's not use those words either. There's too little dropping of errors, dropping of attachments and cruelty. Too little awareness. That's what the world is suffering from. Not lack of religion, lack of awareness, lack of waking up. That's what religion is all about. That's what it's supposed to be about. Look what we degenerated into. Come to my country and see them killing one another. You find it everywhere. This is what it ended up in. So, the one who knows does not say. The one who says does not know.
Tom quam ignotum, as unknown. Hold on to that. Okay. Our third session is going to focus on these ideas that you heard Anthony De Mello share in the audio presentation. Let's begin, though, with some awareness. So I invite you to sit back and close your eyes. And start to look within. Take a deep breath. First, become aware of the feelings going on inside you, the thoughts passing through your head. And then shift. Shift from the feelings and the thoughts to simply being aware. And if you find you're getting drawn back into thinking and feelings and not being aware, just take a big deep breath and sink back into that pure awareness, just being right here, right now. And one more big deep breath. Start to come back to the room and stay aware. In a lot of ways, that's the great secret. That's what we've been talking about the past few weeks. And as you can tell from the audio recording of the last retreat he gave Anthony De Mello considers awareness to be the core of all religion. And in fact, he goes a step further. He says, in terms of spiritual practice, he says there is an even greater secret. It's basically awareness, but he describes it a little differently. And in maybe one of the last retreats he gave ever, this was a retreat he gave in India, and it's the subject of a book called Mastering Sadhana, and that's by one other Indian Jesuit named Carlos, who, oh man, his last name I'm forgetting. But these are basically Carlos's retreat notes from Tony De Mello's last retreat. And he gives us the great secret. The ultimate way to eliminate all attachments, all illusions, all conditioning, the traditional quest of all mystics, the highest achievements of all the saints. He says, here it is. Here's the problem. The self is the cause of all our troubles. De Mello says, we've given ourselves, the self, the idea of the self, undue importance, have made it the center of the universe, as though everything had to turn around us. And since, in fact, it doesn't, we, I might insert there, inevitably feel hurt and upset. So here's the secret. Drop the self and you will be free. And of course, as you've heard him say, this secret was staring him in the face. I mean, he's a Jesuit priest. Of course, he has read the Gospel of Mark, in particular, Mark 8:34-35, which is a line he quotes often. Deny yourself, lose your life. And yet he didn't really understand it by his own admission. So we've been talking about letting go of attachments, just being aware of specific people, things, experiences, ideas, feelings that we have that come up in the course of a day and that we feel attached to. And De Mello has been saying, okay, drop those attachments. But he's been saying it like, drop them one by one. The root of all attachments for De Mello is the self. He puts it like this. You need to disidentify with yourself. And if you know anything about contemporary teacher Eckhart Tolle, they sound very similar at this point. Tolle talks about this too. He talks about how we invest our sense of identity in our beliefs, in people, in experiences, in physical possessions and psychological possessions and spiritual possessions. And De Mello says the same thing. We invest a sense of self in things that are not who we really are. So a good sign to know if you're disidentified, and conversely to know if you are identified with yourself, is over the experience of being upset. So what I mean by that, if you are still attached, especially attached to yourself, you likely will feel upset, and that upset will kind of overtake your moment. That's a sign that you're still in need of disidentification. You still need to drop the self. But then De Mello says, if you really are dropping yourself, here's a good sign that you know this. You're not being affected by whatever happens to you. Do you remember that line from the Gospels, blessed are you when they hate you and revile you? I always used to wonder what that meant. Is it just like, oh, we'll just take insults for Jesus? What does that mean? I think that's what Tony De Mello is talking about here. It's that you're kind of walking around as a blessing, and you don't identify with the person that someone's insulting. Even though they're insulting you, you're not really identifying with that, because you know that self is ultimately not real. It's the unreal self that Tony wants us to drop. The self you and I think we are. The self that is composed of attachments, illusions, conditioning, That's the self, he says, let that drop. The highest religious experience in all ages seems to be linked to this release from a narrow limit of self into higher consciousness, into pure consciousness, pure awareness. So we come back to the actual secret really is still awareness. But there is something we need to discuss first. And you heard Tony talk about it at the end of the audio there, our God concept. We can't, oddly enough, we can't fully drop the self unless we also drop God. And here's where he kind of sounds like Meister Eckhart. In fact, I wonder if he got this from Meister Eckhart. But the self, you see, is invested in its own idea of God. So we could say this, each ego has its own God. And that God doesn't actually exist. Each ego has its own God. And the God this ego is worshiping doesn't actually exist. So to drop the self, we actually also have to drop our God concept. What might help is a little bit more wisdom from the master. These are the stories that Tony De Mello crafted and using this figure called the master. It was a symbol of wisdom. A religious belief, said the master, is not a statement of reality, but a clue about something that is a mystery, beyond the grasp of human thought. In short, a religious belief is only a finger pointing to the moon. Some religious people never get beyond the study of the finger. Others are engaged in sucking it. Others yet use the finger to gouge their eyes out. These are the bigots whom religion has made blind. Rare indeed is the religionist who is sufficiently detached from the finger to see what it is indicating. There are those who, having gone beyond belief, are taken for blasphemers. That's a heavy one. Maybe some of you recognize the Buddhist tale, the finger pointing to the moon. And De Mello, uses that image to great effect here. Some people never get beyond the study of the finger. Others are sucking on it. Others use it to gouge their own eyes out. And rare indeed is the person who goes beyond the finger, who goes beyond belief. Because the self also is fully identified with its opinions, ideas, and of course, religious beliefs. Okay, second story. A disciple complained about the master's habit of knocking down all of the disciples' beliefs. Said the master, I set fire to the temple of your beliefs, for when it is destroyed, you will have an unimpeded view of the vast, unbounded sky. I almost don't want to comment on that. But think of that image. The master is not about building new temples, building new monasteries, building new churches or cathedrals. He's all about knocking those down, symbolically knocking down our religious structures so we can see reality as it is. I set fire to the temple of your beliefs, for when it is destroyed, you have an unimpeded view of the vast, unbounded sky. And here's a story that's not quite from the master, but it's very apropos to what we're talking about. The mystic was back from the desert. Tell us, said the people, what is God like? How could he ever tell them what he experienced in the desert? Can God be put into words? Finally, he gave them a formula so inaccurate and inadequate in the hope that some might be tempted to experience it for themselves. Instead, the people seized upon the formula and made it into a sacred text. They imposed it on others as holy belief and went to great pains to spread it in foreign lands. Some even gave their lives for it. The mystic felt sad. He realized it would have been better to say nothing. Now, this story is very similar, isn't it, to the one Tony told about the blind men who were asking about the color green. And he says, well, it's like soft music. Well, it's like satin, the feeling of satin. And then the blind men are getting into fights over what green actually is. It's soft music. No, it's like it feels like satin. And they get into fist fights over it. And then worst of all, they can finally see, and they completely miss the color green because they think it's, one guy thinks it's soft music. So he thinks, oh, I heard it this morning. Completely missing the color green. The implication, I hope, is obvious. We get so attached to our ideas, which we make a part of ourselves. Remember, the ego always has its own God. And this is like almost at the core of ego, you might say. We get so attached to our religious beliefs, our religious ideas, we completely miss reality. God is in everything, in everyone, everywhere, within us. And we miss God because we're too taken up with our ideas, with how we see the world. Tam quam ignote. Know God as one unknown. This is the wisdom of Thomas Aquinas. Hardly a liberal, or certainly hardly like a new age spiritual guru. This is St. Thomas Aquinas saying this. God is mystery. You cannot know God with the thinking mind. So why do we get so caught up in our religious beliefs? It's because we have egos. It's because those are very easy things for the ego to get identified with. They're very tempting for the ego. Make it part of yourself. And then you think, oh, okay, good. I've got it. I'm a Catholic. I'm an Episcopalian. I'm a Buddhist. And it becomes a really kind of big identity, doesn't it? Let me stop sharing for a moment. So we have in the Catholic Church right now a lot of neo-traditionalists, a lot of people who want to go back to the Latin Mass, a lot of people who want to go back to the church as it was in 1950. Now, by a lot, I don't mean that we have like billions and millions. We don't. It's enough to make noise. But I use them as an example here. They want to go, they have a very specific idea of what it is to practice their religion and to know God. And it can't be outside that. It's got to be these ideas and only these ideas. That's what De Mello is talking about. That's what's got to go. And even more, even the lovely ideas we might have about God, De Mello would say, yeah, those too. It's not like we can't use them. Obviously, we need to use them to talk to one another, talk to each other about God. Of course, we have to use them at church, right? But De Mello is saying, don't think the words are the actual reality. We know what happens, don't we, when people take the words for reality when it comes to religion. We get fundamentalism. And I don't have to cite examples, I'm sure, but it's just, I'll give you one example. When I was working at St. John the Baptist in Silver Spring, we had a funeral once for a young man who was openly gay and died over in I think it was I don't know what country he died in, but he died overseas. And his family was having the funeral at St. John the Baptist, Catholic Church. And we got wind that Westboro Baptist Church, do you remember those guys? Westboro Baptist Church, who would go around protesting funerals of gay soldiers. We got wind that they were going to come to us. So at the last minute, we changed it. We changed venues and confused them, so they wind up not coming. But I think of them sometimes when this topic comes up, because what kind of religion is this? This is just, I hate this type of person. And so I've got to attack them. And this is what God wants. And I'm sure you've seen the signs. You know, God hates fill in the blank. Whatever group we don't like, we're going to fill in a blank with that. So Tony's not talking about something abstract here. This is real heavy stuff. And we have to recognize that even way before we get into fundamentalism and religion that can be hurtful and harmful, and even just religion that's just rigid, we have to be aware that when we say God is mystery, when we really take into account that we know God is the unknown, that means we have to give up our own ideas about God. And that's where Tony wants you to start. He doesn't want you to start with the fundamentalists. He doesn't want you to start pointing the finger over there. He wants you to go to your own soul, your own awareness. What ideas am I attached to? And there might be ideas that you really don't like about God, that you kind of have a repulsion about. I'd say, look at those too, because those might be kind of a negative attachment. You're attached to something else, and you just repulsed by this very name for God, this very way of talking about God. So it kind of cuts both ways. But each ego has its God. And remember that God doesn't really exist, that the ego is worshiping. There's nothing to do with the real God, the real divine reality. And when Tony's talking about awareness, I think ultimately he's talking about loving God as one unknown. So I think awareness, now this is my spin on it, I think he gets here. I think awareness is actually prayer. Pure awareness is loving the unknown God, you could say. So what I'd like to do now is send you into your groups. I have one final story to tell from Tony, but I'm going to save that until the end. So what I'd like you to do now is go into your groups. I believe Lisa has the questions. I can repost them if I need to. And I think you have enough, though, to talk about. I gave you a lot in this short time. So there are the questions. And I'm going to read them real quick because I think it might help you too. Do you have any attachment to something religious? If so, what is it? And this can cut the other way. Do you have some kind of hard feelings that come up when something religious comes up? When do you feel self-conscious? How can you drop the I at those times when you feel self-conscious? What is your favorite image of God? Could that be an attachment? So as always, take one of these questions, take them all, go in your own direction. But I'll leave Russ and Lisa to put you into small groups. And we'll be back in about, I'd say, let's give you about 25 minutes. Is that okay? All right. Welcome back, everybody. All right, let's open it up. Let's hear what you got to say. And then we're going to end with a little story from De Mello. I did find it on the video, but it's very short. It's only like 3 minutes. So let's open it up before we close with a little De Mello story told by the man himself.
I have a question for you. This detachment from all of this things that we're aware of, I then place that back into the church, and I hear the words, we believe, or I believe, or I will do, or I am. And if the very nature of those assertions is completely contrary to the spirit that you're talking about, it seems to me, how do you, or don't you, or do you, I mean, do you have the same tension with the words of the various things that we read and recite together? Do you have the same problem, or do you not see it as a problem for once or some reason?
Yeah, I don't see it as a problem because I know that those words are good to use, but I know they're not the only words. And that's kind of how I resolve it. In other words, because God is mystery, almost anything goes. I mean, we have a guideline, at least, in terms of what Jesus taught and showed us, but you can describe God in a lot of different ways. The problem I have is when we rigidly hold on to, it's only this, and we can only put it this way. And so there's I don't know if there's something similar in the Episcopalian Church, but
Well, I'm just asking about personal meaning. When you say a statement of, I believe this, do you actually believe that? When you say this, do you actually do the things that you're saying, or are they just words? That's my question.
I think they are. They're doing that. They are doing the things you're saying, but it's De Mello's perspective.
You personally are doing the things you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
You as an individual person are actually doing and actually believing the things that you're saying in every part of these liturgical passages.
Yeah, I'm believing what they're saying, but I'm also aware that words are limited. So there is a tension. I won't say there isn't a tension. There definitely is a tension of, yes, God is love. So if we had a creed that said, I believe God is love, I'd agree to that. I'd say amen. But at the same time, I'd have to remind myself, God is beyond anything I can ever understand by the word love. And this is maybe where our liturgies, they need more silence. I'm not sure what happens at St. Aidan's, but we could use more silence, at least in liturgies in the Catholic Church, because there's just too much of an assumption. The words are the thing.
Right.
And it's a lot nuanced, more nuanced than that, Russ, did you want to say something?
No, I was just, totally agreeing.
Yeah.
We have a Celtic service at St. Aidan's that, has more space built into it than the standard Episcopal rite too.
Well, too, for me, I will say, I say words, but I may not believe every dot and tittle. But for me, it connects me into a community of faith. And I may not believe each word or each thing, but it connects me. And so for me, it takes me right back, like the Eucharist. I may not believe every part of it, but it takes me right back to the upper room and the Last Supper. So it connects me with the community. For me, that's what it does. It doesn't state something definitive about God or about belief.
And I have friends that choose not to say some of the creeds, but they're at church on Sunday mornings to be in that community of worship. And for me, to say the words, even if I don't understand all the words, I know that all over the world, there are people saying those same words at the same time, and that brings me to tears. It's that connection.
Yeah, and that's the power of words that they can do. They can make that.
Blows
That's
me
kind of why I thought you were going there, Jack, with your question. They have that power to make something happen. Certainly. I mean, just listening to De Mello talk, you get a certain feeling. I know when I listen to certain people talk, I have this, their words kind of do something to me. So there definitely is that quality. De Mello is just saying, good, don't make that a part of your identity. Don't wrap yourself around those words. I mean, literally, don't wrap your whole sense of identity around. It's only these words. Anybody else?
I think that comes back again to relationship, because as Peggy said, when we say words that express thoughts that maybe other people are having also, it's, you know, it's a connecting point.
Well, I'm an outsider because I don't actually believe the things that the words say. I understand what the words mean. I don't actually believe every sentence. I absolutely don't. I disagree with them. I argue with them in my head at the time. So I have no sense in which I really feel a participation. In fact, I feel a disassociation. In other words, I hear people saying, well, I believe this, and they say something, and I'm supposed to say it with them, but I don't agree with it. If I were to say it, I'd be hypocritical. It's a false sense of community because I don't really believe those things. So when they believe those, when everybody believes these things and says these things and means what they're saying, then I find myself not a part of that community because I don't believe all of these things. I believe some of them. I believe some aspects of some of them. I believe almost all aspects of all of them sometime or other, but I certainly don't at the time that that's going on. I certainly always have places where I absolutely disagree and I'm absolutely disagreeable and I am not part of that community. So I find that these expressions exclude me rather than include me.
However, does every person in a community have to agree with everything? Because that would not work. Every person, we're all different. And so I don't think it's necessary for everybody to, quote, believe everything to believe the same way. I don't believe people think the same way. I think we're all different.
I don't either.
And we can still be community even though we think differently.
I'm talking about my feeling.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Oh, I see. Okay.
And
So
my
you don't
feeling,
feel-
and my feeling is that I am not part of this group when this happens. That I can't. I'm not really here. And so, at that point, since these things are typically recited before the Eucharist, I find, well, this is the thing that is uniting them. This is how they are united. I'm not really united with them. I'm not really a part of that. And so I'm not a part of it.
So Tony will sometimes quote the line from, I think it's from Matthew, you know, they call me Lord, Lord, but they don't do what I command. And he uses that to point out how parroting the beliefs is not helpful. And in fact, parroting the beliefs can be a sign you're just identified with the words, whereas Jesus came to light a fire of transformation, we could say. This is kind of preempting the story that we're going to hear Tony tell in a few moments. But there's no way we can let that fire spread if we're just kind of consumed with the words. And so that's really what Tony's going here, is to not get so caught up in the words. And just to hear you guys talk about this, it makes the whole thing out to be kind of a head trip, right? It can sometimes feel like religion is just a head trip about, I need to say these certain words. But it's not really about that. As Tony keeps saying, it's about awareness. And in awareness, there is no disagreement or agreement. It's just awareness. And that's the wonderful thing. It kind of is the space in which opposites are held together. Disagreement and agreement. We can disagree and agree, that's fine. But like the two blind men, yeah, green is kind of like soft music. Yeah, green is kind of like soft, felt satin, but both are ultimately wrong. So give up your words and just enjoy the mystery. It seems to be what De Mello is saying.
Eckhart Tolle has a beautiful short video on interpersonal relationships, and he says the of primary importance is the deeper interconnection with the other human being. So even though we are discussing something that we are on different sides of politics, for instance, that's just like the content, but the deeper connection, that's actually the awareness that must be the primary awareness. And so the invitation could be to be aware of the cosmic Christ that's in all and through all. And that's the deeper connection, and we're aware of that connection. And then words will differ, and we can discuss words, and we can debate words. That's fine. But the deeper connection is always there. And if we forget that deeper connection, I think then we feel alone and separated and so on. So the invitation is to be aware. And I think that deeper connection is exactly what you said. Is that awareness. That's the container and not the content.
Yeah, that's right. Anybody else?
It reminds me of in my middle years, 20s and 30s, I guess, I moved around every year or two, and I always looked for a church wherever I went. And so I was able to experience a lot of different religions because they were what was available. But what I looked for was a church that had the Holy Spirit, which for me was a sense of loving presence, which I think is what Emmanuel's talking about. Something that's there between and among the congregation, which I feel is true at St. Aidan's. That it's a felt sense, and the words were the same or different in these different churches, but not what the feeling was there in the congregation.
Yeah, kind of following on that, old Southern wisdom in the Bible Belt was the way you found a new church when you went to a new town was you drove through town on Sunday and saw which one had the most smiles on their faces with the people walking out.
Never heard that. That's a really good sign.
Thich Nhat Hanh will love that one. He always said, yeah, you must smile. It's the inner smile, and a smile in your heart, and smile now.
Yeah.
I have a prayer that I've had for years from Anthony Padovano. He's a former priest and a theologian. Life is a series of connections. When we understand the connections that bind us to the past and the future, to Christ and to one another, to the strangers on the road and the friends in our homes, when we connect water with wine, bread with Jesus, faith with doubt, tradition with presence, we are healed and become whole. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
I would respond one more time here on this. I have perhaps a little bit of context, but I will go to a church service and I will not really say the liturgy because I don't believe that line. And I will not go to the Eucharist line, but I will sit in the back door where I sit. And people will go up and take the communion, they take the Eucharist, do the action. And as I see these people going through, I will pray for them in a positive way. I will be grateful for them in a positive way, but I don't feel a part of that because I don't agree with the statements that I have to make in order to really embrace it. And I don't really make those statements because I don't really believe them. It's not just a matter of being detached. It's a matter of what they mean and what I mean, and they are opposites. And I don't say them. I'm not saying that there aren't times and many times when the opposites of the same thing are the same thing. I know that sounds so strange, but sometimes what we think is one side of a question and the other side of the question turns out to be the same side of the question when we listen to it more carefully. So I'm not saying that that doesn't happen, but I'm just saying my personal reaction is to the rigidity and the exclusive nature of the things I'm supposed to say. Because when I say those things, if I were to say those things, I would be excluding people who don't agree with the things that I'm saying that I don't mean. And the last thing that I want to do is to exclude somebody from me because I am saying what I don't believe. That's a horrible thing to me. And so that puts me in an odd situation. But as far as the people who say these things in the pews around me and then go forward and go through the Eucharist and I support them and I care about them and I pray for them as they go through.
Sounds like you're joining them with your heart, Jack, but not with your mind. Your mind is yours.
The people, yes.
I keep
But
thinking.
the words that to me seem to be, yeah, the words seem to be making opposition. I don't deal with.
Yeah, that's fine.
Barbara, I would love to hear that prayer again.
Oh, sure. Lisa, could if I send it to you, could you send it to the group?
Sure, I'll pop it in the chat.
Thank
Okay.
you.
This week, I looked into the word metanoia that we wrongly translate to penitence because of the Latin. But it's meta, it means past or beyond, noia, knowing. So the invitation to the kingdom or the presence is past thinking, and it's the other side, it's post. It's, you know, so it resonates with me exactly, Jack. So no, that's good.
Yeah,
Way up.
transcend your mind. Yeah.
Sometimes it helps me for whatever reason. I was sort of saying this in our small group about how I can sort of love the church and be grateful for the role of the church in my life, and at the same time know that it's not about the church. And there's something I guess profoundly reassuring to me in the thought that even if the church, whatever we mean by the church, what any one of us in any place in any situation means by the church, even if that were to fall away, everything's okay because God is. So God is. I'll stop right there.
God is, yes. I
Or
am.
following on with the Greek, it's the top of Plato's divided line, noesis, which means direct grasp, not dianoia, which is below that, which is reasoning and using words and thinking in that way, thinking logically, but direct grasp.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is what Tony's talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, he is. That's what awareness is. Awareness is this direct apprehension of reality as it is, without my filters. And what we've been talking about tonight is the major filter is my beliefs, plural. And they can be religious in nature and they can be secular in nature. It doesn't quite matter. Excuse me, one of my cats is just. He really liked that point I was making, I guess. But that's it. Those are our filters. And so dropping the self is just really dropping those filters by just being aware. So all this comes to, De Mello is a really simple spiritual teacher. Very simple. It's amazing how much he plays with this, but his basic line is, we all have attachments. If we want to be happy in terms of heavenly bliss, not feeling happy, but happy, like happy in terms of the reign of God.
Joy.
Right here, right now, we can have that happiness. We just drop our attachments by being aware. Any other thoughts or comments before I want to share you this one last story from De Mello? Again, it may take about 3 or 4 minutes. I want to make sure if anybody has something burning they want to share, they get to share.
I was just wondering if there's any part of it, because dropping the thinking and the thoughts, but there's also a part of the social conditioning and the programming that we have inherited, which sometimes it's even at the subconscious level. It's not necessarily, kind of in our thinking pattern, because it's more like in our reactions, our subtle attitudes towards, situations and I don't know that Tony De Mello kind of worked those areas quite the way we kind of understand them nowadays.
Yeah, no, he didn't talk too much about the unconscious or the subconscious, but well, there's no but. I'm not sure. I know he didn't say those. He didn't use those terms really that much if at all.
Well, he didn't use those terms, but he talks about having your buttons pressed and things like that, which is in that neighborhood.
He does talk about kind of our automated responses, which might get at maybe what you're saying in terms of the subconscious, because he will say this: examine your upsets, as I said earlier, because whenever you get upset, that might be a good signal for these deeper patterns you're talking about. Which, yes, those are the kinds of things he wants you to be aware of. Those are what he would call attachments. Yeah, these kind of operating belief systems, not the creed that we might say on Sunday, but this operating, like this is my kind of operating belief system for the day. I have all these assumptions and expectations about my day. So he means both things when he says the word belief: religious beliefs and these kind of assumptions and subconscious patterns. Yeah. Great. Yes, fantastic. I wish Tony was here. He is here in a way, in many ways. And he's going to be here right now.
There's this guy who invented fire, the art of making fire, see? And so then he takes the tools for making fire and goes up to the north where they have these tribes shivering in the cold, and he teaches them the art of making fire and the advantages, and people become interested. They learn, and what you know, pretty soon they're cooking, they're using it for building, and before they had time to say thanks to the inventor, he had disappeared. He didn't want any thanks, he just wanted people to benefit from his invention. He goes to another tribe, and he attempts to interest them too in his new invention. But he ran into a snag there, see? The priests began to realize how popular the guy was becoming and how their own influence on the people was diminishing. So they decided to make away with him. They poisoned him. A suspicion arose among the people that it was the priests who had done it. So you know what the priests did? They had a huge portrait made of the man. They put it on the main altar in the temple. They devised a liturgy by which the man would be honored, a ritual. And year after year, people came to pay homage to the great inventor and to the instruments for making fire. And the ritual was faithfully observed. But there was no fire. No fire. Ritual, remembrance, gratitude, veneration, no fire. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and fail to do what I tell you? What's he telling us? Love, love, that's what he's saying. What's the major obstacle to love? What I've been talking about today. our programming, our obsessive attachments. That's what's blocking it, as I hope to show you during this session. The best religion in the world is the religion called love.
Best religion in the world is the religion called love. And love is awareness. Can't have can't have awareness without love, can't have love without awareness. They're one and the same. So thank you so much for having me. I'll turn it over to Peg, Lisa, Russ, whoever wants to take over.
Well, thank you again, LJ, for another series, another enlightening series.
How will we wait 11 whole months for you to come back?